My name is Karen Woods. I'm the Operations Manager with COILLTE Nature. In this video, we're bringing you on a tour of the Dublin Mountains Makeover. We'll show you the 5 different forest types in the Dublin Mountains. We'll show you the techniques we'll be using to manage the forest over time and give you a sense of how the forest will change in the coming years. The forests in the Dublin Mountains were planted with timber in mind, optimised for productivity. Timber forests are great for growing tall, straight trees with no knots, but they lack the variety and mosaic of habitats that nature thrives on. Our plans will enhance the biodiversity value for a range of species by introducing new native trees, increasing the amount of deadwood, and managing the forest with a permanent forest canopy. This will improve the forest biodiversity value considerably over time. We're also working with the Dublin Mountains Partnership to improve the recreation tracks and trails for everyone to enjoy the forests now and into the future. So let's go take a look at what we're doing. So here we are in a beautiful mature stand of Sitka spruce. Many of these areas are 50 to 60 years old and starting to mature into wonderful cathedral-like forests, which the public really enjoy walking through or biking through. So if you take a look around here, you can see we have a very simple structure to the forest. We really just have the one canopy overhead and very little growing on the forest floor beneath. Really just a few herbs and a few mosses and plants growing. So we want to thin out the forest, allow light reach the forest floor, and new plants and seedlings grow in their place to gradually improve the structural diversity over time. And this will improve the habitat for birds, insects, and nature. In some of these forests, we'll need repeated interventions before the light is reduced enough to allow regeneration to take place. And in other areas, it's starting to happen and the gaps are opening up and seedlings are starting to grow. But as you can see, most of the cones on the ground are from the canopy above. The regeneration we'll expect is primarily Sitka spruce. Occasionally we find native birch and rowan and even oak regenerating in these forests, but they're light-demanding species and they're also usually get eaten by the deer. So in the future, in some of the bigger gaps, we will come in and underplant or do an enrichment planting with native trees. And they will need to be protected with tree shelters and continue to open up the canopy around these trees to give them the light to keep growing in the future. Continuous cover forestry is a close-to-nature forestry approach that mimics natural processes. In Ireland, the main natural disturbance would be windblow. So we have a pocket of windblow that occurs, it creates a gap in the forest, allows light reach the forest floor and new seedlings to grow. In some areas you can see where the regeneration has taken place, but the leaders are becoming stunted. So we need to release these trees, give them more light to allow them keep growing. So you can see we have some of these trees marked with the pink lines, which will be removed in this CCF thinning. Keeping these mature spruce trees on the landscape will provide important habitat for red squirrel present in the Dublin Mountains. Red squirrels spend over 70% of their time feeding up in the canopy, so you need to really stop and look around and look up into the canopy to be able to spot them. But they're just wonderful if you do get that opportunity to see them when you're out for your walk in the forests. With continuous cover forestry, we also will increase the amount of deadwoods, standing and fallen deadwood in the forest, which provides really important habitats for a range of invertebrates, again improving the biodiversity value of these forests. Many of the original forests have matured and been felled over the last 20 years. Most have been replanted with Sitka spruce, and in some cases larch has been added to the mixture to bring some autumn colour to the hills, as it is a deciduous conifer tree that loses its needles in the winter. Many of these areas are now starting to become ready for thinning at about age 18 or 20 years. And in the future we hope to bring more colour through planting native trees in these areas. The first thinning involves cutting access paths into the forest After that, the thinnings become more selective in nature, clumpy, to create uneven spaces through the stand, areas of light and dark, so that we have gaps for future regeneration and an understory to develop. It's important to have regular interventions into these stands, coming in every 3 to 4 years with a thinning. We want to increase the stability within the stand and allow individual trees to develop good deep crowns. It will be selective in nature, favouring the good quality trees, increasing the range of tree sizes, and opening those gaps for future regeneration and improving the structural diversity. As we thin, we will look to favour non-Sitka species, so especially where a larch was planted or where natural regeneration of birch or rowan has come into the stand, we'll look to thin around this and release these trees. In the gaps that we've opened up, we'll hope to see some natural regeneration of birch and rowan, but if we don't, we'll come in and plant some trees in tree shelters in these areas. This is Barnaslingen Forest. It's a mixed high forest planted over 75 years ago. Parts of this forest are old woodland, meaning it's been in forest cover for over 200 years. And we have some beautiful old oak trees present in this woodland and a rich diversity of ground flora typical of an old acid oak woodland. So our long-term vision for this part of the forest is to have a broadleaf high forest with the oak present, and in the areas of conifer high forest to gradually convert this to a more mixed forest of conifers and native broadleaf tree species. So again, we will use CCF here to selectively fell some of the beech and larch trees, to release the old native trees such as Scots pine, oak and birch, and to improve the structural diversity of the forest and enhance the habitat for wildlife. In Barnaslingen, where the canopy is more open, we have lots of native trees regenerating naturally. So we will select individual trees to remove and allow these trees to continue to grow, and in other areas fell trees and go in and underplant with native tree species to supplement the natural regeneration. Standing deadwood provides nesting holes and foraging sites for great spotted woodpecker, who returned to our shores a number of years ago and whose distribution is spreading across the east of the country. Currently, 90% of the Dublin Mountain forests are conifer species, mainly Sitka spruce. Most of the broadleaf forest cover is non-native beech. Continuous cover forestry approach isn't suitable everywhere, and especially where we want to change the species to increase the native woodland cover in the mountains. So we will use a different management approach. Here we will be turning the timber forest into native woodland, an R&R approach. R&R is remove and replant, so turning the timber forest into native woodland. To establish native woodland, first we do an ecological survey to assess the soil type, examine the ground flora and the hydrology of the site. This will help us determine the most appropriate native woodland type and mix of native tree species to plant. Much of the Dublin Mountains are at high elevation with peaty podzolic soils, so a pioneer birch woodland is the most suitable forest type. We'll be planting a mixture of birch, about 45%, 10% rowan, and then with groups of oak and Scots pine planted on the drier areas, and other minor species scattered throughout. Willow will be planted in wetter areas, and then along the edges, hawthorn or hazel will be more suitable on some sites. On lower elevation sites where mineral soils are more common, the most suitable native woodland type is an oak birch holly woodland. In order to protect the new native trees we plant, we will have to erect deer fences. In areas which we won't fence, we will use protective wraps or tree shelters around the native trees. When we replant these areas that have been felled, we will look to maintain buffer zones along the watercourses, and where we plant in these areas, the density will be much reduced to create a more open habitat with dapple shade along the streams. In other areas, we'll maintain open spaces around biodiversity features such as rocky outcrops, standing deadwood, or a clump of mature native trees or a wet hollow. This will create opportunities for niche habitats to develop in the future. Forest fires can be a serious problem. Here in Carrigolligan, a large area was burnt in 2018. Much of the leaf litter on the surface and the top layer of the soil organic matter was destroyed in the fire, and the soil has now been laid bare. Some of the beech, larch and Monterey pine trees escaped the damage, and we will maintain these. But in other areas, many of the trees were killed, particularly the conifer trees. Then in the storms during 2019, this already damaged area was damaged further, with many of the trees blowing over. To repair the damage, we'll clear fell much of the area and replant it with native woodland. This will be a slow process, as it's difficult for machines to access the area through the wind-blown dead trees. Here in Carrigolligan, we're at slightly lower elevation than other parts of the Dublin Mountains, and the soils are more mineral-based. So the native woodland type most suitable is an oak, birch, holly woodland type, so that's what we'll plant. Before we plant the area, we need to fence it to keep out the hungry deer. Given the size of the area, we're dividing it into 6 different plots. This will allow us to maintain access to the wonderful array of walking trails and forest roads which people enjoy. We hope you enjoyed the virtual site visit with us today. For more information on the Dublin Mountains Makeover, please check out our website, and there you can register for the newsletter too. Hopefully we can do some walks and talks to show you these sites in person, so please keep an eye on the website for updates.